I now invite Mrs. Irina Bokova for her part of this morning's historical dialogue to give a presentation here. Madame Bokova.
Monsieur le Président de l'Assemblée générale,
President of the General Assembly of the United Nations, ladies and gentlemen, ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen, representatives of the civil society. First of all, please allow me to congratulate you, Mr. President, on having organized this dialogue with the candidates for the post of the Secretary General of the United Nations. As you have just said, Mr. President, this is a historic dialogue, and I congratulate you and thank you for the opportunity to have an interchange with states members of the United Nations. I think the transparency and accountability of this process, of this very important process, is a responsibility of the member states, and obviously it's a responsibility also of the candidates. I did already submit my vision statement for the United Nations. Please allow me to, at the beginning, say a couple of words on the country I come from, Bulgaria, and also explain to you a little bit about my professional and personal history. Bulgaria is one of the oldest countries in Europe with a culture and history which is thousands of years old, at the crossroads of East and West, North and South, which through the upsets of history has known glorious times of tolerance, dialogue, and also acquired knowledge of the others. After the fall of the Berlin Wall, Bulgaria, and I would say also me, I am from the generation of the Bulgarians who had the opportunity to work for the reunification of Europe and for democracy and human rights. We did make an enormous effort to change the country, to transform the country, to have a transition towards a democratic state, prosperous state, a member of the European Union. Being the first Secretary of the Council of Ministers for the relationship with the European Union, I do know what a transition is. I do know what it means to adopt a new constitution. I do know what it means to transition, to create institutions, to also have the ambition for social inclusion, and to do all of that under peaceful conditions. And I think that my participation in the development of the new constitution of Bulgaria, in which I was very involved on human rights. I was also very involved on women's rights and the equality of sexes. After I worked as a Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs, my participation in the 3 United Nations conferences as a member of the Bulgarian delegation on male-female equality, Copenhagen, Nairobi, and Beijing. And after that, I was elected to the post of Director General of UNESCO. All of this gave me, I would say, the audacity to present myself for this position now. And I very strongly believe in multilateralism. Now, and with everything that's happening in the world, with the new challenges which are arising, we do know that the United Nations in October last celebrated its 70th anniversary. 70 years in the service of peace, security, human rights, and I would say development. And that was the time to take stock of this situation and meet enormous challenges, mobilize the United Nations and the international community around the Millennium Development Goals. But I also know very well that the new challenges which we are confronting these days, refugees, conflicts, the growth of violent extremism, destruction of our heritage, these growing forces who want to convince us that we cannot live together, and this is unacceptable for me. And as a convinced multilateralist, I think that the United Nations have today bet on prevention, peace, dialogue, diplomacy, resilience. I think that everything that we need today, all that we need today, is new competence to live together and respect one another. And in this respect, I think that the year 2015 was a turning point with the various agendas, the 2030 agenda, obviously, which was a follow-up of a major effort made by the international community, member states, of course, and then the agencies, funds, programs, the United Nations system, and the civil society and the private sector. This is the agenda which gives us today the audacity and the ambition, I would say, to attain a new step, a very important one for the United Nations. And thereafter, of course, and I also want to underscore here, COP21, the Paris Agreement on climate change. I think, and I would like to pay tribute here on this to France, Peru, to those countries which presided over this effort to have the agreement at COP21, which provides us with a new ambitious goal and changes our approach to climate change. With the cooperation of the private sector and scientific communities, civil society, and obviously governments, all of this also provides us with a possibility to make out of all of these agendas a unified agenda. I am convinced that if we have a common vision on the 2030 agenda and the climate change agenda, then we will be able to attain sustainable development goals and the climate change goals. And without that, it's impossible. At the same time, since I'm talking about 2015, we all know that 2015 was the year with reviews, reports, reflection, very important ones, on the various crises, a humanitarian crisis. We had an enormous humanitarian crisis, the refugees from Syria and other countries who are impacted by conflicts. We also saw the challenges presented by this United Nations systems that need to be overcome in order to resolve these issues. And we also saw that member states initiated ways of reflecting on peacekeeping architecture, on the way we accompany states when they're in transition. I'm convinced that peacekeeping forces are there to help the society to transition towards peace, to build institutions, to develop public policies, and finally end up with peace and sustainable development. And I know that Mr. President is looking at me every now and then impatiently, wanting me to wrap up this presentation. So let me say this. I will say something which is very important. I am really personally very attached to this. I think, and I did put this in my vision statement, I think that the 21st century has to be the century of a true commitment to equality between the sexes and to provide women with the opportunity to develop as equal members in their society. And I do say this not only because I'm the first woman who was elected to be Director General of UNESCO, and not only because at UNESCO we have two priorities, Priority Africa, and the second priority is the equality of the sexes. But I'm also saying this because we see today that it is not possible to reach peace or sustainable development without the equality of the sexes. We know what the obstacles are. We all know Resolution 1325, and I congratulate the Member States and the Security Council to have passed this resolution. But we know how important it is today to take a look, an in-depth look, at the role women play in peace, sustainable development in their societies. And we do know also, unfortunately, that there are far too many obstacles. I do hope very much that afterwards we will be able to discuss them. But please allow me to say now that amongst the obstacles which were overlooked and ignored for far too many years, for far too long, is violence against women. And I think that the United Nations has to assume greater responsibility in order to eliminate this kind of violence. It's a violation of human rights, I would say, but it's also an obstacle to becoming a healthy society and to have lasting peace. I'd like to stop here, Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, and of course I am ready to answer your questions.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Bokova.
Thank you very much, Madam Bokova.